Hi, everybody. We're live. Thank you for attending this session of Nice Talk. I'm Pearl Lieberman, Product Marketing Manager in the Multi-Channel Recording and Compliance line of business. And with me, I have Efrat Kaner-Nesimov, Director of Marketing for the Multi-Channel Recording and Compliance line of business. And today, we'll be talking to you about probably the most discussed regulation in the industry for the past year, GDPR. And so the GDPR, for those of you who have basically been living in a cave for the past year, is the General Data Protection Regulation that was issued by the European Union. Just a few words in case you really don't know about the regulation. The GDPR basically sets the idea of putting privacy by design, of putting privacy at the center of every compliance strategy that you have, and looking at the way you collect and you process the privacy information of your customers, of data subjects. Enshrined in the regulation, there are ideas of data minimization for organizations to not use private data if they don't need to. And I think some of the most talked about parameters of the regulation are about the right to be forgotten, because essentially the regulation gives your customers, give data subjects the right to access their data, the right to have a copy, or the right to have it erased, which for the contact center is. And of course, you have all the incentives of putting privacy at the center of your activities, and then that's the carrot, and then you have the stick, and the stick are the huge fines that come with GDPR, 4% of the annual turnover, or 20 million euros, and that is absolutely huge.
So we wanted to speak a bit about what happened a year after, because for let's say for 2 years we're speaking about GDPR now, and the industry is speaking about GDPR, and actually now after 1 year, let's see a bit what's the situation among our customers, among in the market itself. So first of all, we see more enforcement. We see a lot of items of penalties from different industries for different organizations, whether it is Facebook, whether it is other organizations. So GDPR is basically really in terms of the fines, we are starting to see that more and more, and that's across the globe itself. And that's something actually very interesting, because at the end of the day, I think that privacy is an issue, is one of the top issues that are being discussed among organizations. And GDPR is a good catalyst for that. And you will be able to see that, you will see actually that not only although GDPR is a EU regulation, but basically we're starting to see more and more privacy regulations across the globe, whether it is Japan, whether it is Canada, whether it is Brazil or Australia or whatever. So you can see that across the globe, there are multiple regulations, let's say, imitating GDPR or going in the same direction as GDPR across the different regions that we see.
You can mention the CCPA in California, the Brazilian law. India is also talking about it, and then all the existing laws that have become more aware, that have added more mechanisms, and sometimes it's fine. And it all turns down for us to the essential questions of why is that important for the contact center? I think it touches upon every persona in the contact center. It touches upon IT, obviously, because essentially we're talking about data protection. So who's in charge of the data really is IT. Agents are the forefront of the activities. They're the ones who need to collect the consent. They're the ones who need to say the right disclaimers. Business, because privacy is becoming a customer experience differentiator. The performance of agents is now being measured, pretty much everywhere, is being measured on how they are able to capture consent or make sure the privacy is respected, and obviously compliance, because it is their bread and butter. One persona that is not mentioned here, not really the contact center, but is the board member. At the end of the day, if there's a fine, if the name of an organization is makes the headline, that's a board issue, because this is total brand damage, and that is pretty uncontrollable. So the idea is really that privacy impacts everybody, and GDPR impacts everybody in the contact center.
That's true, and maybe I can add to that because you described here the different personas, but at the end of the day, when we're looking at our customers, or when you described the the main cornerstones of the regulation. So when looking at IT, for example, things such as the right to be forgotten or data portability, the amount of effort that an IT person needs to do when looking at a complex environment such as a contact center in order to adhere to this regulation, to GDPR, is actually huge.
And that is something also that we've seen in our latest survey when we have looked at the data in terms of what is done for privacy. It is something that is really resource draining for IT, and at the same time, IT and compliance professionals are very much aware that they need to make more effort towards privacy. I think it was 88%. 88%.
Yeah, 88% of the people that answered the survey, and this is actually, and I do urge you to access the survey, go to nice.com and download that, because there's a lot of valuable information that you can gain from this survey. But on this specific topic, so basically 88% of the IT people that answered the survey actually stated that when looking at privacy, there are a lot of things to do. They are not ready for the aspects of privacy yet. And if we're looking at GDPR, if we're looking at the California law, if we're looking at all the activities that are done around privacy in the world, this is something actually very concerning.
And that's something that our customers ask us, what can we do? What can we do to be more ready? What does it mean to put privacy at the center of your compliance strategy? And for us, there are a few steps that we advise for, that we see as making it a winning strategy. 3 steps that I think we can describe as being, first, automating. Automating is very important because there are so many things that you need to be doing, and to be able to have dedicated mechanisms to apply analytics on specific consents or on the way you delete the data. It takes away an enormous amount of the pressure and the activities that IT has to perform. Automating is one. Controlling it. You want to be able to know if you have private data, where it is, why it is being used. So the idea of applying dedicated mechanisms to control the data is essential. And at the end of the day, it's all about protection. If there's a breach, you want to be able to protect the data of your customers. And that's not only encryption. That's about having end-to-end solution. That's about being able to streamline the activities that you have in order to perform better and to make sure that you protect whatever data you have in the database.
Maybe also add to that, when you're speaking about control, basically, until now, in most of the cases, we saw actually that, who was driving this was actually the organizations and the regulations, or the regulator. And now when looking at GDPR, actually the consumers are the ones that are pushing that. So if we're saying about control, for example, where is the data, why is this data stored, and so on, actually we see a big push coming from the consumers themselves. They have the right to ask, what are you doing with my data? Or I do want you to delete this data that is private data, and things like that. So
what happened in the past year is not only about the fines that have already been applied, it's the amount of complaints that have been received, whether it is from different data authorities in Europe. People are complaining, people are aware of their rights, and I think it's going to start having a snowball effect where the more they're aware of their rights, the more they see the gaps and they kind of push for more enforcement of the regulation.
That's true. And not only in Europe. I mean, if you look at the CFPB, for example, you will see an increase in complaints relating to privacy. So it's definitely all over. And I think if you want to summarize it, is maybe a statement that you're not alone. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're sitting and trying to understand what should I do with the GDPR, how should I get prepared to that, how should I adhere to that regulation, and how should I comply with the request of the consumers, at the end of the day, most of the organizations are now sitting, investigating, and taking actions in order to do that. And I would like to state that basically we got you covered. We have a dedicated solution called Compliance Center in order to assist the organizations, specifically in the contact center, to adhere to, in this case, GDPR, but not only. Yep.
I think that's a wrap. Fat, I want to thank you guys for attending this session and remind you that there are a wealth of assets that are available online. The survey that we mentioned. There is also a dedicated GDPR 1 year after white paper that we published with Dick Bucci from the Betters Associates. And we will also be having a webinar next week, so feel free to join and learn more about GDPR, what's happened, and how we see the future forward, and how all those new regulations will be impacting the contact center. Thanks, guys. Have a nice Friday. Bye-bye.
Thanks.